It's 2:00. We'll wait just a minute for other folks to join.
Hi, Nan. How have you been? I think you're muted.
I can't unmute. Oh, yeah, there I am. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine except for fall allergies. Whew.
Uh,
It's been rough. Hey, I thought your article or that interview in the Pacific City Sun explaining the emergency system was really good. The Q&A.
Oh, thank you. You know, people are entitled to their own opinions, but they're not entitled to their own facts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent point.
Yes, absolutely.
If we can just get people to agree on what's an opinion and what's a fact, we'll be in good shape.
I'm waiting a moment for Rachel. I know she's planning to be here, and she's leading our first topic discussion. There she is. Hi, Rachel and Bill.
And I got Paul in here too. My camera doesn't go over that far.
Okay. Hi, Rachel and Bill and Paul. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the board briefing. We'll open this meeting on October 23rd at 2:02 p.m. And we'll jump right into our topic list. And the first topic is a TLT briefing that Rachel is going to lead us through.
I think I'm just going to do a screen share.
Okay.
Okay, see that?
Yep.
Okay. So you've seen a lot of this before. I just kind of keep it on this white paper. I circulated it earlier today or last night. So this just has the statutes, the ordinance that we're following. I've been tracking different meetings. Most notably, we've kind of been in a holding pattern. Mary Faith has been doing a lot of work going around to all the different cities. I'll let her report on that. I don't know if you want to report on that now, Mary Faith, or a little bit later.
Do you want me to jump in now? I can.
Yeah, sure, before we move on.
Okay. So I have been going to city council meetings and talking to them about the idea of raising the tax. I've been proposing, or rather saying that we're considering raising the tax from 10% to 15%. And the folks who have been, to whom I've presented have been largely supportive. People have asked some good questions, some pointed questions. There was one person in Bay City, a counselor, expressed hope that some of this money could be made available to fire districts, which was an interesting discussion. But I think that we probably all agree that some of our fire districts are radically underfunded, but this doesn't seem like the best mechanism for addressing that issue. Folks have asked in the cities have asked how they would raise their tax, and I haven't been able to advise them because Bill advised us that because we started this tax with the voters, that in order to increase it, we needed to go to the voters. But that doesn't mean that's true for the cities. And we've heard from Jason Grant that different local governments have raised taxes in different ways, including just by voting to do so. So I have encouraged them to seek their own counsel about how they would raise their tax. And at the Tillamook City Council this week, one of the counselors asked how it comes across if on the ballot, if we go out in May of 2025, which I've told everyone we're considering, how will the readers or the voters rather see it? Will they see that the county's going out and the cities are going out, and will they think that those are different taxes? And so I said, I didn't know if when it happened 10 years ago, if the county's measure was on the same ballot as the city measures. I don't know. So we can do a little research about that. But largely the questions have been technical. There have been a lot of questions from city councilors about what are the restrictions for the 70%. And so they've been very receptive to the message about tourism facilities. You can spend the 70% on tourism facilities, and in nearly every community in Tillamook County, there are attractions for tourists. And so there's a lot of opportunity to invest the 70% for the betterment of the community. And it's really exciting. So I would say largely it has been, I've gotten an excellent reception. I haven't yet been to Rockaway Beach, and my intention there is to get on the agenda after the election, just because they're having a pretty exciting election season right now. And so I thought that would be the timing would be better to do it in November after the election. And also Wheeler. I haven't been to Wheeler yet either, so I'll get that on my calendar. So I haven't heard any so far in those discussions. I haven't heard any hard no's or even soft no's.
Great.
Mary Faith,
Yes.
as you know, the draft is, we're going to go to 15%. That's just what Rachel came up with, working with me to put on the draft, and giving a 14% credit. Have you had any discussions about, historically we've taken 1% from the cities, but the way this might come out, we might get as much as like 4 or 5% from the cities?
Yes, I've talked to all of them about that and told them that our intention is that the high tide rises all boats, that we would all go up. And if they don't go up, if we go up countywide and they don't go up, we would get that additional percentage, but that's not our intention. We're not asking for that. We're suggesting that we all go up together.
I got you. Thank you, because I really kind of struggle with that wording. But if we leave it at 15 with a 14% credit, then it's like, the city of Tillamook, I think, is 10%. We'd get 5%, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, so that's fine. I just, I didn't know if that was something the cities were aware of, and I'm glad they are.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other updates, Mary Faith?
No, not on
Okay.
that.
Okay, so we've talked before about legally if we can do a piecemeal approach, or if it has to be all the county, or if we exclude the cities. And Bill found in the Constitution that it's basically got to be uniform, which has led us to where we are, which is clearly why the ordinance was written the way it was before, that it's a countywide tax. So as you've already kind of described, Bill, we're looking to increase 15%. That's not new information, and continuing to retain the county's credit of 1%. But there may be more if the cities don't increase theirs. So along those lines, Bill has worked with Tommy to begin drafting this revision. So this is just a starting point, but in the caption going from 10 to 15, and then where the credit language is going from 9 to 14%. And similarly in this section, just clarifying the percent changes. Bill was toying with some different language this the language in B about the credit it's a little confusing. We were all wrestling with this when we first started this conversation. So he was looking at potentially another way to say it. This doesn't quite get at the intent, though. We've kind of gone rounds on that.
That was, Rachel, under my thinking that maybe we were only talking about continuing to get 1% from the cities.
Yeah.
So that second language really is,
We're going to delete it now.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll disregard that option.
And I brought that up with Rachel, and she suggested deleting it to begin with, but I kept it in there anyway.
So, yeah, I think there's some clarity that's starting to come to fruition here about what this really means, and really just a simple revision in the percentage is probably the cleanest way to continue forward. The only other place that I think we need to revise, and we can continue talking about that today, is just this distribution of the delta, we'll call it, of the new 30% funding that's going to the public safety. So we don't need to wordsmith that today, but from a language revision point in the ordinance itself, this is where we are. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions, or if you want me to keep moving. I have a shared screen, so I can't see. Nobody's got a hand up. Okay, I'll keep moving. So it looks like drafting of the ordinance is pretty straightforward. That was something we weren't sure about, the timing and how long that would take to get to, but it looks like we're making some progress there. So this is just another view about the scenario. This is still accurate, Bill, this table? Yeah. So this is basically what the language in the ordinance is saying. And so if everybody's on board with that, the only real next piece of this discussion before we finalize the draft language is how it's going to be distributed. And so this is where we left off based on these distributions that were prepared by Tommy. So it's, I can't highlight just a row in a PDF, but it's this one here under 15%. We just plugged them into as a starting point. So, and then just clarity on if especially specific to the sheriff's office, are these funds offsetting general funds, or are they in addition to the sheriff's office budget? I know that keeps coming up, and that should definitely be clarified in the language when we get to that point, because there's differing opinions on what this really means. Doug, I see you got your hand up.
Yes, I do. Do we know so far, after we had that meeting a couple of months ago with all the cities, I've had a couple of conversations just passing around the county on radio conversation and all that. Is there any pushback or opposition or indifference, maybe is the right term, from the cities? Or all 7 of them with us, or are they engaged? Or before we get into all the details, I think we ought to ask that question.
So I haven't been yet to Wheeler or Rockaway Beach, and I think I haven't been tracking what's happening in Rockaway Beach, but I know there's a lot of Facebook chatter about short-term rentals in Rockaway Beach. So I don't know what kind of reception we'll get there, but their election season is so intense and seemingly contentious that it makes sense to approach them after the election and talk with folks who are going to be in the seats. So I don't know what kind of reception we'll get in Rockaway Beach, and yeah, that's the answer.
Okay, well, thank you. They're probably the number one because I think they have the most or the highest volume and the most number of rooms to rent and all that. So it seems to me they need to be with us or neutral, and rather than push back on something before we get too far into the weeds on all this. But we can still keep doing what we're doing. I just don't want to let that jump out at us here down the road.
I
Sure.
did meet with. This Paul here hiding next to Bill. I did meet with the Rockaway mayor and the city manager, and they were both said they were for this, but of course with the election, I think it's wise as well to wait. But the current mayor and the city manager told me that they initially had some doubts, but now they were on board. But that's not the whole city council either, so.
Thank you. I had heard that too, but not from them. I was encouraged to hear that. But yes, if the leadership changes, then that conversation could change.
Okay, so do you all want to continue talking on the distribution percentages, or?
I'm happy with them. I know these are
Okay.
the first numbers we talked about, but they make sense to me.
So could I ask again on, so if the sheriff office gets 762,000 out of the 15%, the marginal increase, then that's a $762,000 back to the general fund that would have backfilled that were there not the room tax increase. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is the general school of thought, although there are some that think it maybe should be on top of the existing sheriff's office budget. So the decision before you is it a backfill or is it an additional allocation? That still needs to.
And that's exactly the reason for my question is all along, when we started the budget exercise some months ago, is we said, well, this would bring us $1 million that could be spread in several areas, and that would be dollar for dollar against the projected deficit. So I think we need to answer that question fairly quickly up front, only because it will compound whatever happens down the road with the outside group that's looking at the budget.
Correct. I agree with you, Doug. I do think we need to answer the question sooner rather than later. And we've heard the sheriff say that it's his hope and intention that this would be over and above because he'd like the sheriff's office to be able to grow their services. And I don't disagree with that vision of growing services. I think we certainly need them, but I'm thinking that my intention about these funds from the beginning when we started talking about it is that it would make up a certain chunk of the revenue that our seed corn that we're using to balance the general fund budget. So my hope and intention is to keep to maintain current service levels and thank you, Tommy. And to maintain current service levels and make sure this money goes into the general fund and continues to support the sheriff's office and hopefully guarantees current service levels while we go through this budget stabilization activity. And I hope that there'll be a time when the sheriff's office can grow, but I think we have to stop pulling from the beginning fund balance in order to balance the general fund before we think about growth.
Thank you. I think that was the intent when it got onto the matrix that we've worked through now. So, but we'll see where it goes. But I think we compound our problem if we do something different than the original idea.
Yeah, and I would agree with both my colleagues that at this point, while we would love to have it be an addition, that just doesn't look like the money is there. And I think as we look at the distribution, two things for awareness. One is that we're looking at 762,000 return to the general fund because the emergency management, if I understand correctly, would be a growth. And of course, radio system maintenance would be a growth, if I understand correctly. So can anybody correct me if I'm wrong about that aspect of it?
Just on the radio system maintenance, there's two ways we could spend that money in radio maintenance. We could use it right now to offset our radio maintenance, our communications budget. which is where our current radio maintenance is, which that wouldn't fully cover the budget, or we could save it to accumulate funds to maintain our more expensive radio system if and when the bond pass.
So it could actually be, the radio system maintenance could currently be an offset to the general fund because that's how we pay for the current radio system.
It could be if you decide to, yes.
Okay, and I think I would say that philosophically, if we are doing that for the sheriff's office and asking them to hold steady and using this as a backfill, it would also be potentially the right thing to do that for at this time with radio system maintenance, since we don't yet have the new system and don't yet need to maintain the new system. But that's just a conversation.
So where would you all like to go from here?
Are we locked in at 15%? I know we looked at other numbers, but seems to me we've settled on that, and that seems to be the number that's become public, so to speak. And so are we going to say that our efforts are towards 15%? We're no longer looking at any other number as a percentage. Is that correct?
I think 15 is where we ought to be. I'd be uncomfortable going higher, and I don't know why we would go lower.
Yeah, I think 15 is a good place to be. I mean, it's significant, but not so significant, if that makes sense.
Well, it's relatively easy to explain and even sell because other people are paying it, the ones who bring the impact with them. Let me ask Nan, I think I saw, well, no, she's on. Is 15% still a reasonable number based on your knowledge across the region?
Yes, yes, it is. And, you know, like Hood River has an 8%, and on top of that is the county's Hood River County's 8%, so that's 16. Portland is 20, and sometimes higher because they have a TID there. It's, you know, to me, this is not unreasonable at all. And actually, you know, we did a bunch of research to find out when it is that visitors consider a tax. And the only time that it ever becomes an issue is for when there's big conventions, and the convention, you know, owners or the organization putting it on are trying to create a budget that will help them make money, cover their costs, and will encourage attendees. And that is the only time that I have found in research, in talking to other states, everything, that is when a TLT becomes a consideration. For normal visitors, even normal business visitors, it's not a deal. It's no big deal. They always expect fees, and truly, I don't know of any hotels here that put on an extra fee beyond the tax. I know that some STRs will have some like cleaning fees on top of that, and you know, their rental, but it's not common.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And Doug, you know, we'll have the draft at 15%, and then you'll have public hearings where I'm sure you will get some public testimony from folks, including the lodging industry. And, you know, that's just a number that you start out with. And if you get some testimony that makes you think that it's too big or not that big, you can always adjust it after the hearing process.
Mhm.
Well, that was my next question is what's the latest from the lodging industry? Because if they're with us, we're good. If they decide that it's not a good number, then we have a bigger problem. But and that's why I asked about 15%. If we're settled on that, and is that a generally accepted number? Now we've heard that it's not an issue for travelers for the most part. So then the next question is, how about our own lodging providers? Is that, we all know it's a pass-through, but are they going to say this is too high or about right or lay in the weeds, or do we know?
I'm going to convene some meetings with lodging providers, but I wanted to talk to all the cities first. So now I'm shooting for before, after I talk to Rockaway Beach and Wheeler, but before Thanksgiving, hopefully. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of feedback we get from providers. I think what I've heard just anecdotally is that people hope that raising the tax won't decrease visitorship, but they don't really anticipate that it will. I think people are more worried about, what if we had another pandemic, or this is what I've heard from people, like, what if something unexpected happened that dried up tourism? And so I don't think that's really connected to this. But as you said, it's a pass through. We don't anticipate that any owners or operators are going to pay this out of their pockets. It'll be a pass through fee.
Okay, so I'm hearing we're going to stick with these percentages. Do you want me to proceed with working with Bill to draft that into the ordinance?
I feel good about it.
I think it's the right number, and it's already out there, and it makes sense. It's defensible, and I think it'll be not an issue at all for travelers. My only concern is the industry, and they're not paying it, as you said. So, and we're not out of line with the region. So, it seems to me that that's the number, and put it down and start working on it.
Okay, the next part is, as we've talked in these conversations about increasing the TLT, what are we going to do with all the money that comes out of the 70% increase? And Orla's certainly wondering about that. And so I put a list together of all the past efforts that have been done that dug into this. And we don't have a complete comprehensive facilities list that is prioritized. We have a prioritization tool. We have lots of great ideas from the community. We have priorities from like themed priorities, like we know trails are a priority, parks are a priority, things like that. But we don't have very specific project lists that are prioritized. And so I was talking with Nan about this idea, and she was willing to take this task on in pulling together all of the data from all this past work, create a spreadsheet. She went through it and color coded it by what's been done, what's been underway. It looks great, and it still has a lot of outstanding projects, as you can imagine. So I'm going to have her share her screen and go through that. Debbie, does Nan have share capabilities?
I will check.
Yeah, I can't share yet. It says only meeting organizers. So
I just made you a presenter, Nan. You should be able to share now.
there we go. Okay. Okay, where are we? I'm just going to open and see if this will work. Whoa. Can you see this? Is it coming through?
Nope. Did you
Oh.
find the share button?
Yeah, I did. Let me see here. Sure.
So if you go down to your Windows button when you hit share,
Yeah, I
You
got
see-
that.
okay, and if you click on that, you should be able to see your document within that list. That working
Oh.
at your end?
It's not coming through. Hold on.
Okay.
No, it's not coming through. Sometimes this Teams doesn't work all that great on Macs. So,
You want to send it to
Do
me?
yeah, do you have it, Rachel? I'll send it to Deb right now.
Rachel stepped out for a minute.
Okay,
Thank you, Paul.
on its way.
Thanks for doing this work for us, Dan.
Oh yeah, and this is just the first step. This took all the information from like 6 different reports that we've done over the last 10 years. And I met with Rachel today, and I'm going to go through and refine it. And out of that refinement, really take some of the very priority things that we've seen over the years and put them at the very top. So.
She sends it to me.
All right, and I think you can scroll up to the top there. And so the reports that we used are the asset mapping report, which was done in, I think, the summer of 2014. The community listening report in 2017 that was conducted by Futures Council. The sustainable community planning in 2019 by Future IQ. And then the several community planning destination management workshops that our group does. I think that was 7 or 8 communities. A facilities gap analysis that our team did. And then most recently, a recreational accessibility assessment at 3 county parks, Kilchis, Trask, and Barview Jetty. So what I did was go through every spreadsheet and then color-coded them into these are done or almost done. These are planned or underway, that's yellow. The green is done or done and almost done. And then the yellow is planned and underway. And then the gray is to consider. These are the things that have not yet been done. And they're about, this is the reason I'm going to reduce this and combine and refine it. But there's about 18 categories that came through all the plans. Wayfinding, of course, cultural heritage and arts, wildlife, and this is mostly about it's some things that ODF and W can do, but also it's more about education about wildlife and safety. Property and business enhancements, culinary agritourism, tourism marketing, industry training, those last 2 categories are already completely done. Sports and fitness sites, public safety, a conference center was a big one. Some people said convention center, but we're talking about a conference center with an adjoining hotel. Restrooms, trails and bike trails. Trails are a big deal. They're probably the number 1. Boat launches and boat docks, also very highly rated. Trash management, accessibility, transportation and parking. And a lot of parking is getting done over the last few years. City parks, people want, or community parks are highly desirable to be fixed and enhanced. And then, of course, outdoor infrastructure. So Rachel and I went through this today. We identified some things that TLT wouldn't be appropriate for. So I'll go through here and refine this. But what's amazing to me is the commonalities of what people want from the north to the south, and trails. People want connective trails. They want to be able to walk safely or bike safely to the next town or to a park, state park. And that's the number one. And of course, there's a lot going on in this area in trails. There's some coalitions that were formed. The Salmonberry Trail Foundation is doing some great work now. They're starting to move forward. And Manzanita just got a more than $2 million, I think it was $2.3 million grant to do a master plan for their trails connecting to Nehalem Bay State Park, Oswald West State Park, and Nehalem and Wheeler. So there's a lot that's going on already. Now, will they need help? Yes, probably. So we talked about which ones that are underway could use some help, and that TLT would qualify to help. So I'm going to go through that as well.
So what's the marginal increase in the 70% from where we are now, roughly? And if we do 15%, then take the 70% that would be under this program. How much money is that in dollars, round numbers?
I don't have that in front of me, but maybe Rachel, it'd be probably another 50%, right?
Yeah, I got it here. Let me do another screen share. Oh, sorry. So here's the 15. Maybe it's not on this one.
So part of the question then, would we leave the road department, what it shows on there, about a little over 2 million, that stays the same and goes up maybe with inflation, but not percentage wise.
Yeah, so it looks like we go from 4.8 million to 7 million in the jump between 10 and 15.
So there's another couple of million for sure, and maybe a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right, Aaron.
Yeah, so a couple million more per year.
So that's pretty serious money. You can get some stuff done over a period of time.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
the goal.
Yes. And I will tell you, and I know I've said this before to you, but this is the only county in the whole state that is investing their TLT like this. The only one.
So are others just using it purely for promotion then, Nan? I mean, what are they doing?
It depends on when they put it in, but mostly marketing. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly marketing. And many have to do that. If you've got a big convention center and a big expo center and lots and lots of hotel rooms, you've got to get heads and beds. They're going to do a lot of marketing. In Multnomah County or City of Portland is that way. Lane County, because they have the new big sports arena that can host international, events. They're going to have to market. They just have to. So, but in rural areas, it's different. It's just different.
Well, I think the opportunities to invest the 70% are vast and so exciting. I think there are so many things that we've already identified that we care about, things you've listed off, things that we're already investing in, dreams we've had that we'll be better able to move those projects along and better situated to consider doing bigger things like a convention center. What would that, did I just say it wrong? Not a big one,
Like a conference center
conference
Yeah.
center.
with a
Yeah.
hotel. Yeah.
Yeah, a public-private partnership. I think where it's very exciting, and we certainly won't have any trouble investing the money to the benefit of the county. So I think it'll be great.
So when we go to market this, assuming it's 15%, and it's a pretty easy story to talk about the 30% and what would happen there. But this increase of a couple of million, would we want to have a roadmap on that one with some defined objectives or projects? Or would we just say, yeah, trust us, we're going to get her done and you're going to like it? It seems to me we would want to have at least something in pencil, so to speak, so that people would say, well, you're going to get all this extra money, what are you going to do with it? And that would
Sure.
help sell it as well, and then also bring some reality to fresh money. So, how far down that road do we want to go?
I
Yeah.
think we do want to, and I think we'll want to have, if not lined out with timelines and, project management goals, we'll want to have at least some things north, central, and south. Like these are 3 projects, north, central, south, that we really want to start working on, and this money would enable us to do X. So I recall when we passed the road bond 10 years ago that the road department came up with the list of roads that would be improved, and it made a difference. Because, people from different parts of the county could see their roads on there, or roads that they traveled, and they wanted that to happen. So, and it did happen.
Yeah.
So I think something like that, I don't know that we'll have them locked in, but we can certainly have these are our top couple of choices list.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And then I think it's a blending of that list so that to your point, there's north, central, and south, but there's also facilities that are related to what our full-time residents want to see and have been asking for, but also some that are what our tourism providers are hoping to see, right? Because that's the other piece, as we talked about already, is to have them on board. They need to see a future that benefits them as well. So I think it's choosing, wisely in what we prioritize and put forward to kind of try to show, so everybody can see something that they want in that, and that we don't scare off our full-time residents thinking it's a conference center right now that they're like, we don't need more people. So trying to find that balance.
Agree. And we'll get to that. I'm going to start refining this spreadsheet, and we'll start just paring it down, and there will be, what rises to the top. I'm sure it will be the right thing for the whole county.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
So I think where we are is maybe late November, having the next board briefing. Mary Faith will be able to present on what she's found with the lodging providers. Nan will have an updated facilities report, although you'll have it before then, I'm sure. And we'll have some draft language on the percentage distribution. And coming out of that meeting, we should pretty much have all of our ducks in a row to then start going to the broader public or preparing for the ordinance adoption. We could do that sooner than later in preparation for the ballot. The timelines I'd given you before were worst case.
Okay.
So is there a circle back with cities? We've done, Mary Faith's done a good job of going out, but is there a circle back where we get the commitment, and what does that end up looking like?
Well, the Manzanita City Council asked for another meeting, and I'm not sure how we want to organize that. If we want to have a huge Zoom meeting where, all the mayors and all the city councilors join us, maybe that is a good way to do it. Or we could have a big, we could use a big room someplace in Central County. I don't know. So they have asked for a follow-up, and I have committed to them that as we define this process better, that I will also keep them informed. So I think we'll want to figure out how to get back to them after I meet with Rockaway and Wheeler.
I think it might be good to have another large group meeting like we did initially, once we have the draft and we have a final plan, if you will, before we start scheduling hearings.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, that's all I have on this.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready to move on to our next topic? If so, that is Dan. Thank you, Dan, for your patience sitting through the TLT with us. And hopefully, I was thinking about you, Dan, while we were talking about this. Hopefully, it was informative to you to see some of the possibilities that what the community has told us they want, which is largely connected trails, and some of the possibilities for investing TLT facilities funds.
Yeah, I think it's great. First of all, commissioners, thanks for your allowing me to on your agenda today. I appreciate that. And it's all real exciting stuff about what can be done. And I'm always looking for the next project. So I am embedded in the new Trails Coalition, a group that formed this last summer, working with them and anxious to see what we can do with that group. But today, what I'm looking at is looks like a couple of things on the agenda. One is to look at fee increases, and then the second thing is to figure out what's the best way to transfer money from the parks to County Central to help alleviate the budget crisis. So I can tell you that I've got a sheet here that I'm in Deb Garland's office, and so she's got a sheet that maybe if she wants to share, I'll show you how we came up with the information that we have. One of the first things that we did was we did a fee survey. The fee survey is at the bottom of the page, and that was conducted late September, early October. So all those numbers are fairly recent. One of the things that we also know is that Oregon State Parks is planning on increasing their fees apart from what's indicated on this sheet. I think that I don't know if those numbers have been published yet, but I don't have access to those. But you can still see that with the rates that we proposed in the third column from the left, proposed rates for starting in January 1, 25, is that it was about a $5 increase per item, and it was really important for us not to be the most expensive, campsites or camp areas within the region, and so that was important. And I think that the rate that we came up with of $5 for an increase, Dev, you can go to the top of the page. Then you can see what happens is that, well, the first impetus was, well, how can we contribute? That was the most important part. But then what we looked at is like, well, if we're going to increase raises or fees, that what I know now is that, to the best of my knowledge, that fees haven't been increased since 2016. So it's been a little while. I don't know about you folks, but I tend to be a proponent of subtle increases on a more regular basis as opposed to larger increases on a irregular basis. But you know what? I wasn't here, so I couldn't do anything about that. But what we have is we've got some other things besides County Central, and that is that we talk about, look at the shower revenue. What that is that we have and had showers that were paid for by quarters. Well, that's real problematic. Not only in the quarter machines, but also in the time that it takes to gather the quarters, to count the quarters, to package the quarters for deposit. And so what we're doing is they're switching to the timers, but we need to make up that revenue because it's fairly substantial for us at 25,000 and some change. So we can do that through a fee increase. Also, what we have is we've got a significant water rate increase for, how do you pronounce it, Watsiko. It was about 62%. So we did the math on that, and we realized that based on the fee increases, that was going to be another $11,000 a year and some change. And then the other thing that we really noticed this last year and surprised me was the refuse management. We're collecting maximum amount of times per week. We still are getting garbage that are put on to, piled on top of our containers throughout the county. We know that most of it, or I should say a good deal of it, is probably home garbage that people have us pegged for. But we need to account for that. We need to be able to pay those bills when we get it taken care of. So all in all, it's 192,000 and some change. And so we did the math, pretty simple math really, and came up to about $5 for the fee increase. And it's based on the night stays, not the number of reservations, because the number of reservations, we had a lot of cancellations every year. And so it was based on the night stays. And then you can see that the sum was nearly 197,000, which is just a few thousand over our target. And so that's kind of where we are at this point. I think that it is a two-pronged question. First of all, how do I get to you so that we can get the fees increased? And then the second thing is, how do we package the money to County Central from parks so it's a legitimate expense that that we can all justify. What's that? Yes. So I guess that's the end of my opening statement.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep.
Thanks for doing this work. Thanks for bringing it to us. I haven't personally done the process of fee increases, so Rachel could tell you who best could lead you through that. What's the actual process for increasing fees? And you're right, it's a two-pronged question. How do we increase fees? And we want to do it soon, because we want to do it by December 1st, because they'll start selling the annual passes on December 1st. So
Right.
There is an urgency about that.
Right.
And then, so that's A. And then B is maybe a question for Bill Sargent or our treasurer about how to specify that a certain amount of this is going into the general fund for public safety. And how does that work? Do we just do a transfer, or is it legal, or how does it work with our auditors? I don't know.
Right.
So Rachel, I'll let you jump in.
So your first question is exactly why we're here. The process is to begin talking with the board about this increase. I know we've been talking about doing, rate case studies and things with Mike, and I think we definitely want to do that going forward. Given the urgency of this, and I think the work that Dan's done to date, I don't know if we need to do a rate case with this. There's certainly a sense of urgency to get this approved by the board if you're supportive of doing so they can start advertising and it's ready for the January 1 sales. So the last time you did a board order was a process that I led for this when we were doing the parking fee increases. And so it's order 20-051. So the most straightforward way, and I'm not suggesting this, but the most straightforward way is to draft an order, post it on the agenda, and you consider it the next week. I don't think we want to do that here. I suggest, so this is the first board briefing. We do have some time before, I think Dan's target was December 1st to get this approved, drafting an order. Maybe we talk about it again in a board briefing. Maybe there's some public outreach about it just to inform the public, and then you approve it at a board meeting, maybe in late November. But the process is pretty straightforward. We update the board order and you approve it at a board meeting.
Gotcha.
Excellent. Thank you. That's great. I didn't remember if it was actually an ordinance, if we had to have public hearings on it. So I'm glad we don't. I agree. We want to have public outreach, but I'm glad we don't have to have public hearings on it. Okay, great. So Dan, the December 1st deadline makes me realize that in the sheet we were just looking at, we didn't see the annual passes. Are you increasing the fee for annual passes?
No, my plan at this time is not to do that, My understanding is, and of course I wasn't here, was that the last time was a pretty volatile experience. And we don't see any reason why we need to go there again at this point. We really want to focus on the camping fees and stay away from the parking fees at this point, pretty much at all costs if possible.
Okay,
And Dan, what percent of your total revenue comes from annual versus the nightly? Roughly.
I'm not, Commissioner Olson, I'm not sure I understand the question.
If you get X amount of dollars from the annual passes, which I buy one along with lots of others,
Right?
and I think, as I remember, the senior pass is like $40 or 45 or something. So that times however many, how is that total, and what percent of your total revenue or overnight stay? In other words, is it 10% or 15 or 27 or some number? How significant is it of your total revenue?
Well, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head. Obviously, I could look at it and get back to you, but our camping fees far outweigh our parking fees. And really, that's the only thing I can say at this point without having the
Sure.
documentation in front of me.
Well, that's okay. In other words, by keeping them where they are, the annual passes, it's not, you're not giving up a whole lot relative to what the other increase would generate.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
so,
And so,
and I heard from Paul today, who maybe wants to jump in here and speak for himself, that the Oregon State Parks just went, their fees just increased. And so I wonder if we know what the new increases are. And Paul, by all means, speak up if you'd like to.
I'll go down here. Yeah, I just looked it up. They've increased a bunch of their fees. I'm not sure if that's something Dan wants to do this time around, or if he wants to, that's something we could do a rate case for, but they are increasing quite a bit. They've increased their reservation fees as well as their 10 sites and campsite fees. Also, interestingly enough, and I didn't know this until just now when I looked it up, they actually do charge an out-of-state RV fee. It's actually by state law. I don't know if that's something the county could consider in the future, not necessarily for this one, but I think it's a good time for a fee increase. It sounds like the parks are doing quite a bit. They cited a 28% increase in their utilities in the last 10 years. So I think us being able to sell this next year is going to be easier, when we can also basically mirror what the state parks are doing too. So that's all I got.
Thank you.
I was going to ask if we know how many of our overnight stays are residents of Tillamook County. I'm thinking about just what the level of concern will be. I appreciate staying away from the parking pass at this point, but I was just curious how much, I think it drives to some degree how much outreach and how much pushback we're likely to get.
Sure. And that's one of the reasons why we're heavily considering, at least in the beginning, non-resident fees, so that it would impact our folks less. But we couldn't come to a resolution at that time. And so perhaps in the future. Again, I don't have those numbers in front of me, the documents, but a heavy majority of our clientele are not from Tillamook County. They're from out of the area. But I'm not able to give you those percentages at this time.
Sure. And I know, Bill, do you know if we're allowed to do a non-resident fee? I feel like I wasn't here for the parking pass, but that was a part of the conversation, and the answer at that time was no. Or Rachel, maybe you know that?
And am I on? Yeah, and I don't recall her, and I'll have to look at that, and I'll also have to look at the bigger question that Mary Faith brought up, or Dan brought up, about how you're going to transfer the fees from the parks, to the general fund. I don't know. So I'm not sure, Aaron. I'll have to look it up again. I do remember it being a conversation piece with the annual passes.
It was. I remember the conversation as Joel telling us that it would be illegal to make different charges, that if we charged out of towners more than locals, then the people we charged more could sue us. And so there was, because we seriously talked about it, that we wanted the day use fees to be higher for out of towners. So
It's
I'd
actually,
like
it's a constitutional issue, that is true. But for somehow, that's why I was gonna look into how the state is able to do it for overnight lodging. But it is a Oregon and a US Constitution issue, to charge someone from another state for more money, but they get around it with hunting license and fishing licenses, and so maybe there are some exceptions with overnight camping.
Right.
I should be.
Perfect. And then my other question is, Dan, it looks like you're basically raising this to be able to give to the general fund, which is great. Is that going to be enough to cover park operations since it hasn't gone up since 2016?
Yeah, I think we're doing okay. The big thing for us is that we haven't really been spending a lot of big money lately. Hopefully that's going to change soon. The only thing I'm now concerned about is raising the TLT funds or the tax, because we pay into that as well. And so that's something that has, because I only took into consideration those things that exist now, not what's going to exist. And that's not something that we, at this point, we've tried to compensate for in order to try to keep an even keel, right?
But last year, Dan, we in the budgeting process last year, we determined that the TLT funds that are collected in parks are returned to parks for use for investment in tourism facilities. So Tillamook County, so your TLT funds will come back to you.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I support moving forward with Dan's proposal and doing it quickly to accomplish the December 1 timeline. I like Rachel's idea about doing some outreach. I think that I appreciate what you said, Dan, about doing this annually. And, because you could probably make a bigger jump this year, but if you're going to do it annually, you don't really need to. And then, if we do a rate case later, the rate case could be for next year. So I like what you put together for us, and I support it moving forward.
Great.
I think I would support that as well. I think there's a pretty good, rather strong case actually, to bring it up to where market is, particularly when the state is going up. I'd like to know, and I think you should go ahead. I would like to know a little more at some point, just out of curiosity, about why we can't have a $2 surcharge or some number for out-of-county residents. If somebody comes over from Portland, which probably a lot do, it's not a restriction of interstate commerce because it is not another state. So what's the rationale legally? Maybe Bill could spend the next couple of weeks or months working on that and report back. Why in the world couldn't you charge the people from Portland $2 more or some number?
Oregon.
I'll look at it again, Doug, but I'm fairly certain we can't do that.
Okay, well, you may be absolutely right. I'm just curious because the rationale being, the people here own it, pay for it, and others come to visit, so you nick them a little bit more. And I don't mean that to be mean, just simply to be reality. Just as we understand that the people who buy season passes, I'll bet 80% of them live here because they use the boat ramps and all frequently, like I do. And so, if there's a measure of equity across the region, I can see that as well. And I don't know, just a curiosity, but don't hold up anything to what you're doing.
I think my other question would be, Sean, I see that you're here. Do you have thoughts on how we transfer it? I mean, from parks to the general fund, is that something that our auditor would be engaged as much as county council?
We can't hear you, Sean.
Try that work.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would be still question. Out there.
You're cutting up for some reason. Yeah. We can tell you're talking.
Yes, I've reached out to the I don't have a direct answer yet. There is during summer months our child is more reimbursed for the deputy's time out there, which is doable. I'd like to get more of a either direct transfer or something along those lines that I want to get squared away with first. And I'm just waiting for an answer from them.
So I think you said that you have asked the auditors, you haven't heard back. And then there was more than that that was somewhat undistinguishable.
1 second.
Okay.
Maybe she's coming right back. Yeah, that's what I heard her say too. She's asked, and I think she was referring to Parks currently pays for Deputy Weber services in the summer, and that's a direct transfer for services. So how would this be different? So yeah, we just have to make sure that we're doing it correctly. John?
Yeah, and I'm just waiting to hear back from him. Brad finished our audit and promptly went on vacation till the 30th. So as soon as I have that answer, I told Dan I would let him know, and we'll see which way works best, or if we can work with the parks reservation system, if there's a way to get a report out, something. So yeah, we are looking into it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm hearing is we will go ahead and go forward, even though we're not sure the how yet, but go ahead and move forward because we need to get the process done.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
I think
thank
so. Okay, Dan. So, Rachel, when you were talking about this process before, you suggested discussing it at another board briefing, maybe having some kind of public outreach. Did you have something in particular in mind there? Were you thinking like press release, or what were you thinking?
I wasn't firm on any one idea. I just did not like the idea of having this meeting and then posting the increase on a Friday and you approving it on a Wednesday. So
Sure.
I was just throwing out some different ideas, but I think I would defer to maybe Dan on the target audiences and the best way to outreach this change. And maybe Parks has done this before, I just wasn't aware of it. We didn't just do the Friday and Wednesday last time. There was a lot of other discussion, but it was a bigger situation than with the increase of all the fees. And we'd had several meetings leading up to that approval. So, I'm happy to support any outreach that we need to, but I'm open to ideas and approaches.
Thank you. So Dan, do you want to continue this conversation with me offline, and we'll figure out our timeline moving forward?
That'd be wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for all your work. Anything else for Dan? A pretty fancy condo you're in there.
Right? You like it? It's my new digs.
Nice.
Anyway, again, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about is to tell you guys about a meeting I had yesterday at NCRD at the North County Recreation District. As you will recall, they came to us about a month ago or a couple weeks ago. A whole bunch of folks from NCRD came to us and talked to us about their pool project, their need for revenue, and we left that meeting. It seemed generally positive. We told them, we've just concluded our budgeting process. Think about what your ask would be. They came up with maybe 500,000, like the hospital had contributed, et cetera. And so we sort of left it there, that they would come back to us later with more information. And in the meantime, though, they have gotten some new information and new timelines. So they reached out to me first. And what I learned is that they're almost concluded with phase 2. The pool building project has been in 3 phases. They've almost concluded phase 2. I got a tour. It was awesome. Now you can see, the outside of the building is finished. They're framing it in. The pools are, I don't know what the surface of a pool is. The pools aren't surfaced yet, but they're built, so you can see how big they are. And the one is vast, and you can see the therapy pool. And so they've made huge progress. And So they now need to move into phase 3, which is the, I'm trying to remember the word for the surfacing material inside. They need to do that. And their contractor knows that they're just about out of funds. So they said their contractor told them there's a specific, it's a specialized skill to build pools, apparently. And there are specific groups of people who do that work. So they need to know that NCRD has the money to move ahead by mid-December in order for them to schedule that crew and guarantee the crew. So if they can't say, yes, we have the funds to move ahead with phase 3 in mid-December, the crew will be scheduled elsewhere. So where they're at right now as a board is their options. They feel like their options are to mothball the project, which nobody wants to do, or try to figure out how to raise the funds very quickly, or borrow the money. And so they're $2 million short. So if you recall, that the campaign for funding this pool project has been ongoing for maybe 10 years, a long time. And at least 2 years ago, the district people voted in a bond in the North County Recreation District to fund the building, the construction of the pool at least 2 years ago. And also I think they had done a couple $1 million of fundraising. So they had in that moment in time, they had the money to finish it. But then COVID hit, and then there were delays because they couldn't get things they needed. They didn't have a director. Anyway, the costs went up, the availability of things went down. So that delay cost them exponentially millions of dollars. It was a couple $1 million more the project was now than it was when they bonded for it. So anyway, they're $2 million short. They are hoping, their big ask is that we will contribute $2 million to the pool project out of TLT funding. And, it certainly meets the qualifications for a tourism facility. I said, I told them that I would talk to you about this project, and that we would get back together with them so that you can ask more questions. There was also the possibility of them borrowing the money. So, they've done their research about how we spend TLT facilities money. And so they know that we have some in the account now, whether or not it's physically there or projected to be there. They know we have some in the account now that looks like it's unappropriated. And so they're hopeful. That makes them hopeful. And also they know that we support other tourism facilities such as the fairgrounds and the Pioneer Museum and the Salmonberry Trail. And so that's all true. And the pool is a tourism facility. And one of the arguments they made that resonated with me is that it's an investment in North County it already has multiple funding sources, and so they have a lot of skin in the game. And also that the North County Recreation District, a lot of that, the majority of it, is unincorporated Tillamook County. It isn't. We think of it as being Nehalem because it's situated in Nehalem, but the district, a lot of it is unincorporated Tillamook County. So they made an impassioned case, and I think it's a good ask, and so they should ask. So I'm presenting this information to you right now, and what I suggest is that we ask them to come back to another board briefing and give us more information.
So I'm curious from Rachel what we do have that is not already spoken for, because I think we have some of it that's in there that's spoken for, maybe some that's not spoken for. And are we talking about this year's TLT? Or are we talking about next year's that we don't have, or some of each? Because I think I know a lot about the pool. I mean, I feel like I've heard a lot of that story. My next mental game is, so what do we have? to determine what part of that ask makes sense for us to work toward.
Well, they told me yesterday, and I haven't confirmed this myself, that it says we have 2.99 million unallocated to be determined. And they're asking for 2. We also talked about that if this board didn't want to make a big allocation like that, we also talked about the way that the fairgrounds borrowed money to pay for their what am I trying to say? The seating and
grandstands.
Right, grandstands. Thank you. And paid that back over time. So, I think there are different possibilities, but they need, if not the cash in hand, they need the guarantee of funding by mid-December to keep the project on track, to keep the crew.
So here's a question, Commissioner. Do they, what would happen if they got something less than the 2? In other words, is it all or none? Or could they leverage, let's say the county came up with $500,000 or 3/4 or some number, could they leverage that from other sources to get it done? In other words, is $2 million required to finish, or can they do it piecemeal?
That's a great question, and I think we'd have to ask them.
It sounded like
Maybe.
they had the opportunity to borrow. I think that you said that as well, Commissioner Bell, if we couldn't
was
come
on
up
there.
with 2.
Yeah, it was on their list. So if we didn't come up
Yeah.
with the whole amount, perhaps they would borrow less. Or maybe we decide we want to support them for a certain amount for a number of years, and they could use that toward their loan payment.
So Rachel, I saw you come on. Do you have an answer, or at least a magnitude answer for us?
I can tell you what was in the adopted budget, which is an estimate, as you know, based on what we think the TLT money is going to be, is that we had 2.993,720, so basically $3 million unallocated. So that, as you know, we haven't had a reserve for a while, so that is a reflective of that as we get beyond the Kiwanda Corridor project. Also, we didn't do any active work in identifying projects to spend that over the last several months because we knew this TLT increase in this facilities planning process was forthcoming. So we have intentionally, I believe, been holding on to these funds for a while. But as you know, the Board of Commissioners can have wide discretion. This is the adopted budget. There's $3 million. You can move this money around within the TLT budget. I began putting the projects in here a long time ago because if they weren't in here, everybody forgot what was allocated to what. So you can decide pretty freely on how much you want to allocate to the pool if you want to allocate to the pool. I think there's, I was talking to Mary Faith about this earlier today, different alternatives for if you want to give them a grant award, or if you want to give them a grant award, or if you want to loan the money up front. We have outstanding questions about, when the money would be spent. Do they just need a letter of commitment, but the money would be spent next fiscal year? So there are a lot of questions here, but it qualifies as a facility. But another thing to consider that just coming up for discussion in my office here while we're talking about this is also a big ask, and how much, while it technically is a tourist related facility, how much tourism is used, or how much how high is the tourism use projected to be? If it's a few people stopping by, but it's mostly a community center, that might help tailor what you may decide to give the center. So
that's an excellent question, and I did ask them if they have data about how many out of town, how many second homeowners or out of town users use the facility now, and they were going to try to put that together. They didn't have the report for me yesterday. They were going to try to put it together. I know that we have awarded the parts of that facility. We've awarded facilities grants for their parking lot and previously, and also for the Performing Arts Center. So So to the extent that we've identified it as a tourism facility, we've already invested those funds, but you know, I don't know if we're separating out the pool. But they said a lot of people use it, you know, because they come to the beach, but they can't swim here. So.
Yeah. And I'm not suggesting it's not a tourist related facility. I think it certainly qualifies. It's just, if they're asking for 3 million and it's lightly used by visitors, is that where you want to put the 3 million or 1 million or 2 million? That's all I was suggesting.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. And it's 2, they're asking for 2.
That's my question as well. To use that, do you have to be a member of anything? I don't recall exactly how that works. Or you just go in, do you pay a fee?
Good question. I'm not sure. I think there's a gym membership, so I'm not sure about the pool, but we can find out.
I would think there would be some kind of a fee. And again, is it a tiered fee for residents or non-residents? And you said early on that maybe we should invite them back and ask a few of these questions, maybe even send them a memo in advance and then have an open discussion. I think that would be pretty productive and probably answer some of these questions.
And now that we know we have the money, it's a conversation worth having.
Okay. All right. Well, will you all please then send me your questions, and we'll get them back on our agenda for a future board briefing. Anything else on that? It was exciting to walk around in there yesterday, and I hope that they're able to finish it. And if you're interested, I know you could get tours also. There was just that construction excitement, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so great. Like the therapy pool, they're building it so that they'll be able to roll wheelchairs into it directly. And the other pool is of a size that they can have swim meets and, you know, official sports can be used for sports. And it's just going to be wonderful. Okay, if there's nothing else on that, commissioners, what else have you got?
Well, I have a couple items, but Robert, take them in any order you want. Commissioner Scar may have something.
Go ahead, Doug.
Okay, I have, well, first of all, you know, I think everybody's pretty current on the radio campaign. It's going, I would say, reasonably well. I was at Kiwanis today and had about 6 or 8 questions come my way. So what what appears to be that we really need to finish it off, if we had another 3, 4, 5 people who could endorse it, who are not connected to the county or otherwise on the payroll, and just citizens that somebody might know, our neighbors and friends or others, if they could say a sentence or two, and we could stick that up on the websites in a hurry, at least the Political Action Committee website. And so if you know of anyone, I would be interested in either talking with them or asking them for a sentence or two and maybe even a picture. And everybody thinks that would be helpful because we know so many people around the county, and if somebody says it's a good idea, that's probably influential. So I'll just leave it at that. And the other thing I wanted to mention and this follows up a little bit of our previous conversation, when I was at the fair, the county fair, state county fairs, or should be the State Association of Fairs is the name, last Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I met with one of our board members at length, and not the whole board, just one. And then I talked to Cammie, and I've since talked to Mr. Sargent. And the issue is the capital needs of the fair. And as you all know, there's many projects out there that need some attention, and some are wishful thinking, and others are really quite urgent and are bordering on fire life safety issues. And of course, they don't necessarily have a large capital budget, although they do get some monies from different sources, including the year-round operation as well as the fair itself. So where this conversation went, I got to thinking, and I was on the budget committee and somewhat knowledgeable when what used to be TLC, the credit union, before they became part of the First Fiber, when the bleachers at the fairgrounds were condemned, and that's been about 12 or 13 years ago, the fire marshal and others said, you have one more year and then we're going to close it. And so the county at the time said, boy, what do we do? So TLC stepped up, and as I recall, Mike Pierce was the CEO at the time, and they offered a loan of $750,000 to be repaid by the county over 10 years at zero interest, which is pretty attractive. And so the county took it, the fair took it, and that gave rise to the metal grandstands that are there now and will probably be there for the next 20 or 30 years. So I was thinking of that, and I'm thinking, what if we called in several of the banks or all of the local banks and said, what if you banks were to form some kind of a partnership or a consortium and advance maybe $1 million or $1.25 million to the fair with the idea of sharing the risk and taking care of some of these capital needs. And the logic behind that is, number one, a single project or two projects done at the same time has substantially overhead because you don't have the setup and takedown and mobilization and all of that. And you could get stuff done in current dollars rather than dragging it out. And I've talked at length with the fair manager, and she's got enough money to service a debt that's guaranteed money. The county wouldn't necessarily have to step up at all to service that kind of debt. And so my question, I guess, of the two commissioners and anybody else who wants to chime in, would it make sense to talk with the banks, invite them in and feed them a coffee or soft drinks or a bottle of water or something and say, what do you think of this as the banking community in Tillamook County? And I think there's some public relations to be gained by them. And I think there's a great community good to fix some of these assets that have been there for many, many years and are in somewhat of disrepair. And it could be managed and repaid by the fair. And so before I go back to the rest of the fair board and see if they're all on board, and I'm pretty sure they would be, although I only spoke with one at some length. But I did speak with the fair manager, as I said. So I'm wondering if that's an idea that has some sort of legs and at least take it to the next level, which would be inviting the banks and credit unions into the courthouse and visit for 90 minutes and see if there's any appetite for this at all. Or should I just forget it and go home and have dinner? So what would you like me to do?
That's great. Well, I'd like to pursue that idea. We have guaranteed them at least, 2 years at a time, that we have said that we will contribute $250,000 of TLT revenue to the fairgrounds as a tourism facility. So it seems like, yes, if they had more to work on, they could, they could finish a project. So yes, I think it's worth exploring for sure.
I go for it, Doug. I think it does bring up for me the question about the 2 million for the pool, right? And how, as we're making these decisions, is there an investment that's a fire life safety investment at the fair? Should we be thinking at $1 million for the pool, $1 million for the fair? And then it brings up the other question of how do we begin to sift and sort? Is it just by who comes to ask and when they come to ask? So I realize that's the prior conversation, but they connected in my brain when I started hearing this. So I think it does bring that back. And Doug, you and Commissioner are both very familiar with what the projects are that the fairgrounds has on their front burner. And I don't know that because I haven't worked with them directly the way you all have. So I'm not sure which of these is maybe the best approach because I'm not just entirely clear where they're trying to get to. So, going forth and having the banks see if they want to help them is a great strategy that doesn't require anything from us other than what we've already committed. But I think it does also beg the question, should we be looking at those with more urgency if they are fire life safety?
Thank you. Well, I will invite the bankers in, and I asked Bill if he knew anything about banking, and he said that wasn't his. He didn't major in law school banking or something to that effect. And but he did say he would ask some bankers or some attorneys that deal with banks from time to time. And it wouldn't be our issue. It would be the amount of risk appetite that the banks have. But I can just see, knowing some of the bankers and how they think and what banks like to do. You know, if you look around the state, banks are always putting their names on scoreboards in football stadiums and stuff like that. And you know, if they could say they help, and in fact, the grandstands at the fair, I think, has a big poster that it was financed by TLC, the credit union. And so there'd be some PR benefit to them, and maybe if, say, 3 or 4 of the banks joined, they would be on the risk rather minimal of maybe $200,000 or $400,000 each. But maybe more importantly, the fair actually has the money. It wouldn't be necessarily a call on this money that's the TLT money that we just were speaking of. It would be based out of their annual cash flow and the money they take in. And you know, they're a solvent enterprise. I've been looking at their books pretty thoroughly, and they have some reserves, and they're doing this stuff piecemeal, and that is the problem. If you try to do projects that are reasonably significant, you know, $20,000 and $40,000 and $80,000 at a time, there's absolutely no economies of scale. There's no efficiencies. There's plus things cost more over time. So, you know, there's a pretty strong argument to spend $800,000 or $1 million or $1.2 million or whatever the number would be, and prioritize the projects, which they have done on the master plan, and say, well, let's get this done in one lump sum over a period of 12 months and get some benefit from it and reduce the exposure that we have now. I know there's a significant issue with the roof on the dome building there, the central building of the fair, and there's maybe a structural issue, and it's so much easier to do these, or preferable, I should say, up front when you have the luxury of time and expertise and clear thinking, rather than being called out one Friday afternoon when something gave way and you know you have to figure out how to fix it by next week. So having said all that, then I will invite our bankers in and bring over the appropriate people from the fair, and we'll just have a conversation, and more to come. So thank you for that advice, and maybe it makes sense, and maybe it doesn't, but there's only one way to find out.
And Doug, you might want to ask the others at the fair first. Just a
Yeah,
thought there.
I will, and like I say, yes, I talked with only the one, and
Yeah.
I've got a pretty good sense of how they where they're going and what they want to do, and then when they get to that point when they're ready to do it, then they say, well, how are we going to pay for it? You know, pretty logical question, but yes, that's a good approach as well, and this needs to be done thoughtfully, and I will do that.
Thank you. You have anything else, Doug?
No, that's it. Thank you for the time, and always good to hear a chat. And I appreciated the earlier conversation. I saw the pool at the North County Rec District some months ago, and it's a marvelous asset. And when you talk to the people up there, they, as much as any community I've ever known, they have stepped up. When they came before the commission here a month or two ago, and they showed, you know, they had an anonymous donation, I think, of $1 million, as I remember.
They did.
You know, so that tells me that somebody thinks highly of what's going on, and they love their community, and you know, good for them, good for everybody.
Thank you. Okay, Erin.
Thank you. So I want to talk just quickly about stuff going on with STIA. So I think you all know that Salmonberry Trail Foundation was formed a couple of years ago, when we've got Caroline Fitchett, and she's going great guns. I think you, Commissioner Bell, have met with her. I'm not sure, Doug, if you have met with her yet or not.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, dynamic woman. She was behind the political campaign that brought Outdoor School for All to Oregon, to the legislature, and got the bill passed for that, along with funding. So she's very good at what she does, which is getting money and getting people engaged. So she's doing a fabulous job for the foundation. What is happening is that the foundation at this point has an MOU with STIA, and they are moving ahead with the intent of raising the money and building the trail. What's happening with STIA is that that intergovernmental agency sunsets in about another year. And so there is work being done to figure out, does STIA stay alive? Is STIA a necessary and important structure? Or could the lease for the rail go to the Salmonberry Trail Foundation and they could just take it on? What's the role of the STIA members, since we have parks, that's the convener on that, along with the board, the Department of Forestry, Tillamook County, Washington County. And so it's a fairly legalistic and challenging conversation that's being had just to determine what's the right structure. Does STIA need to continue to exist? And if so, does the trail building need to come over to STIA in order to meet the requirements really of the partners of STIA, which are all governmental, right? So there's more unknown than known at the moment, but I just wanted to surface that and let you all both know that there's probably going to be a meeting that will happen in the future that talks about what is the future of STIA, what is Tillamook County's role and commitment to that in the future. We have a retreat that's coming up this next Friday, next Thursday, the 31st, for STIA. We have Doug Decker, who was formerly with I think he was with Forestry when this all started, and he was one of the key conveners that brought everybody together and assisted in figuring out the original structure of STIA. He's coming back and leading us through some different work together to try to determine what the right structure is going forward. So I just wanted to kind of daylight that for you all, so that as we do this work, if we come back with something radically different, like, hey, we're out, there is no STIA anymore, or we are being asked to commit to something different, it wouldn't be the first time you heard about it. So that's the STIA. Any questions on that one?
Thank you. I appreciate that update. And I did just meet with Carolyn on Monday. So Doug, if you have an opportunity to meet with her, she's is delightful. We went for a walk together out at Kelch's Point Reserve, and we had a walking meeting and got stuck in a little downpour and started out beautiful, and then it was raining. Well, we had a great talk, and she has a ton of really positive, constructive energy and ideas, and I was very encouraged. I was encouraged about that project, so I was glad that I was able to connect with her.
Where is her office? How does one reach her?
I can send you her email and phone number, Doug. She works out of her home in Portland, but she's over here quite a bit. She'll be delighted to come over here and meet with you. And Paul, I assume you're still on in there as well. I'm sure she would be delighted to meet with you as our incoming commissioner. So thumbs up, perfect. I will send an email that gives you both of you her contact information. And I'm sure that if I'll just copy you all on it, she'll probably reach out to you, because that's the kind of person that she is. She's fantastic. The other thing I wanted to just throw out there is that Tillamook Lightwave, and Doug, maybe you want to talk about this, is that we're working through that structural change and whether we'll bring on the college and when and how, and made a decision at the last meeting to hold that till January, but to use our next two Tillamook Lightwave meetings to kind of do a little bit more of a deeper dive into planning for the future. Like when we talk about the BEAD grant coming out, in light of what we learned about the Reconnect grant, which is that it's not money we're going to take because it had too many strings and was going to require the county to be the owner, et cetera. As we look at the BEAD grant going forward, is the county, or is Tillamook Lightwave the applicant? Is Astound the applicant? Just trying to kind of dig into what this is going to look like going forward, so that then we'll be able to say to the college, here's where we think we're going. Here's what being a part of Tillamook Lightwave could actually mean, what your benefit would be, what your cost might be. Is it just a community sort of board where there isn't equity? All of these questions, we're continuing to dig into that. And I just share that in case either Paul or Commissioner Bell, if either of you wanted to make time to be at the November or December Tillamook Lightwave meetings, as we, I think, are going to do some planning without really calling it strategic planning, but digging in and more understanding of where we're going.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had that on my list actually, and I just apparently jumped right over it. I got so excited about the fair that didn't
Understandable.
get there. But yeah, Commissioner Scar is quite right. She covered it very accurately. We're now that the issue of valuation has been settled and the port is basically out of the picture and doing their own thing, then the next task is to determine a way forward and exactly what we are. So we're going to spend the next two meetings going through that. And then the college has said time and again, as you would know, Commissioner Bell, that they do have some interest, but there needs to be some decisions made prior to. And so, yes, it would be helpful if both of you came to the next meetings and pitched in and or at least listened in, and because I think there'll be some decisions or at least some concepts introduced that probably will be around for a while. So it would be worthwhile. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be glad to. I'll make sure it's on my calendar. I was actually there yesterday, remotely and virtually for a while until I was working from home until we had a power outage at my house. So I thought, oh, ironic. So I dropped off the call. So I will make sure I'm there in November. Thanks.
I think that's all that I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else for the good of the order from anybody? Got a nice group with us here today. Hopefully by next week, we'll be back in the commissioners' meeting room, but as of today, we don't know what the problem is, and we don't have an appointment to get it looked at yet. So fingers crossed that we'll be back in our meeting room next week.
I do
Anyone
have
else?
one other question.
Please.
If we could go back where we started, I see Tommy is online and he's been, I know, an integral part of the TLT, and we didn't hear from him during our earlier discussion. I wonder if he had anything to add or bring to the party, so to speak. He's pretty familiar with the cities and all of that.
Hello, all. Yeah, I've been listening in. Yeah, I think you got it covered. I didn't really hear anything that that didn't make sense or didn't support what we're doing. So, Bill did a good job, and everybody seems to be in pretty much agreement to this point, anyway. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. I know I didn't want to overlook you because, this is not a radical change, but it's certainly a change, and you've been part of it for a long time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tommy. Okay. Anything else? If not, I want to encourage everybody to vote. And this meeting is adjourned at 3:42. Thanks, everyone.